And we're live. Welcome back to our Listen Edition listeners. It's been a minute. This is Program Lead for Learn with GMP, Matt St. Germain, hoping that you had a wonderful summer filled with time outside and at least a little relaxation. It's hard to believe that it's already flannel season. And speaking of seasons, a little cheesy segue here, feels like it's very much so like the tech industry has been in a season of buzz surrounding AI, and we think we'd be remiss to not discuss it ourselves. So, for today's episode, we're very excited to be joined by two new guests of the show, Stephen Yap, Managing Director of America's Media Platforms, and Reena Jana, Head of Content and Partner Enablement, Responsible Innovation here at Google, who will dive deeper into what this season of AI is all about. Believe it or not, while generative AI has been accelerated across our industry, especially recently, Google has been pioneering AI and machine learning in our products for decades now. So Steve and Reena will discuss more of this, how we're pursuing AI development responsibly, as well as how we're seeing AI play out in the current market. So with that, I'm going to punt it over to you, Steve.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And good morning to you. Good morning, Reena.
Hey, Steve. How are you? Hi, Matt.
Doing pretty well. So a lot of buzz here in New York with that week going on. So it just seems like there's a different type of energy in the air today. I'm not so sure if it's the flannel energy that Matt was referencing. But so it's great to be here. So thank you for having me. My name is Steve Yap. I run the America's Media Platforms business here at Google. I've been with the company for about 16 years. And we are here to talk with Reena about AI. So I get to be the question guy. So Reena, maybe just introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hey, Steve. My name's Reena. As you know, I've been at Google for almost 7 years. I've been in the innovation space, though, for much longer. I sort of started out covering innovation at Business Week, covering, young companies at the time, like YouTube getting acquired by Google, was around when iPhone was started sort of coming out and shaping the future, where very similar to the time we're at now, where AI and generative AI are reshaping everything, to say the least. At Google, I've covered everything from machine learning fairness to business inclusion, and that's how I got involved in the responsible AI team and responsible innovation team, I should say. I sort of bridge between global affairs, responsible innovation, and our research organization too. And we could jump deeper into the AI topic.
Well, I love that you said you could stop there. I mean, like honestly, you're the it person, right? Like you're the person everyone's going to want to talk to. And so I'm so lucky I get to interview you. Yeah, this AI thing, right? Like this is the buzz around the industry. And it's what's really interesting, at least the things I've been seeing and hearing from our clients in the industry at large is like this angst around AI, right? Like it's almost like this conceptual thing that people really don't actually understand that it's been in use for several years now. But you've got all the details. So would you mind sharing a little bit of context in terms of how do we get to where we are today, in particular around AI?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to keep in mind. So in between working at Business Week as a reporter covering innovation, I also always wanted to know what were companies doing after the story was done. So I made the jump. I actually worked at IBM before Google and was around there when we were working on Watson and some of the earlier, maybe very visible AI topics in the industry. And one thing that I learned there is that AI is not new, even then, almost 10 years ago. AI as a research topic has been around for more than 50 years. It's been through sort of AI winters where people were not investing in it in research labs, when companies weren't investing in it. And then it sort of pops up again when people see the value or there's some novel research and it comes back. So AI itself is not very new. And I think we could even backtrack a little bit and think about what AI is. Basically, programming that learns and adapts. It's the science of making things smart. But what is new, as we all know, is generative AI. And I know we're gonna go a little bit deeper into that today. Yeah, and I actually want to reframe this a little bit. You talked about angst and skepticism. There's also healthy skepticism. I think people are very engaged. They're asking smart questions. I think some of that questioning and thinking about safety, thinking about potential harms, thinking about mitigations and interventions to make sure that people have really good partnerships with AI, with the tools that are coming up, especially generative AI. That's all healthy. I think it's good to proactively ask those tough questions. So I just wanted to reframe that a little bit.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think you're right. It's, far be it from the, obviously the extreme of everyone thinks AI, at least from my generation, they think, the Terminator is coming online and things of that nature. But, I think what you're touching on too, is that this concept of responsibility, right?
Yep.
Responsible AI. So can you talk a little bit about AI principles, right? Around
Sure.
kind of how to be responsible and just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm going to go back in time again, a little bit to the origin of the AI principles here at Google. So, 17, which already is more than half a decade ago, I think at I/O, Sundar had mentioned that we're an AI first company. It was a really interesting moment in time because that was the same year that Google Research also shared a paper on the transformer model, which is the backbone of today's generative AI. That is the model that influenced ChatGPT, it influenced Bard, and it was a really big moment in research. But it was also a big moment for us as a company to really say, hey, mobile, we were a mobile first company. The next big thing is AI. We're an AI first company. So we made that really public statement. Around the same time, and this was around the time that I joined Google, 2016, 2017, there were a number of Googlers just engaged in a very grassroots initiative, as we have many of those here at Google. We're very motivated, very aspirational. There was a grassroots movement around machine learning fairness, where Googlers from a number of backgrounds, whether it was machine learning itself, whether it was trust and safety, were really fascinated by the potential to offer fairness for users at scale, maybe through machine learning itself, sort of using machine learning and AI to solve challenges. I bring this up because at the time in 2017, when we had this announcement that we're an AI first company, Googlers in this machine learning fairness group and others were really thinking about, well, if we're an AI first company creating machine learning models, how do we become a responsible AI first company? And sort of challenged a lot of people in the space, challenged ourselves to think about that. And the founder of the Responsible Innovation team, Jen Janae, who hired me into this role, she actually was charged with coming up with a set of principles, along with many others across the company, writing these as a framework that would serve as an ethical charter for AI research and development. And not only that, but she was also charged with going beyond that and thinking of how do we operationalize them? So, how do we come up with these guidelines that were inspired by a lot of different existing frameworks like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as science fiction, sort of like looking at, maybe the Terminator itself, like what could go wrong and what could go right. And sort of putting those together and creating this charter. And that really was the backbone of this idea of responsible AI and responsible innovation and the impetus for these principles. I can keep going on the principles. I can talk about them all day. I really believe in them. But I don't know
Well,
if you have a question at this
no,
point.
no, I think that's first off, like you're in these meetings. I mean, just looking back at that must just be incredible, right? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how I can be a part of those meetings, especially if you're talking about futuristic and sci-fi level stuff in terms of where this could possibly take us. But, obviously we'd like to probably expand a little bit on those principles, right?
Yeah.
So, I would imagine, like, because they're anchored in the core of responsibility, would you mind just kind of taking us through some of those principles and kind of talking about how they're actually applied? Because
Yep.
we have principles all the times in business, but the ways in which they're applied, I think, manifest much differently in the marketplace when we get there.
Absolutely. So the principles themselves are, again, they're a framework. When you read them at first, they seem very poetic, aspirational. On the highest level, they range from be socially beneficial. That's the first principle. They're very Zen-like. For example, avoid creating or reinforcing unfair bias. They are very practical too. Another one is build and test for safety. And some of them too are actually maybe a little scary. We have 7 that are very proactive, like the ones mentioned. And then we have 4 applications we will not pursue, which are basically our statement of our principles in terms of what we will not do as a company. So some of these include, not creating AI with principal purposes to cause injury to people. Anything that would violate international accepted norms for surveillance. So we have those principles that are also on applications we will not pursue. And again, they're some of them seem very poetic, some of them are very practical, but they're meant to really help people make business decisions. Some of them are really tough decisions. For example, we could leave money on the table by not pursuing maybe a certain type of security feature around that might be interpreted as surveillance. So how do we sort of balance that? How do we look at all the other principles and not use it as a checklist, but use them to make decisions on whether or not there are risks or harms against, all of the other 11 principles to help make that decision. So that's really a big part of their value in terms of offering, guidelines for decision making and sometimes really tough decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I think, what strikes me about that is the gravity of those decisions, right? Like that,
Yeah.
it really sounds like you have to consider not only the benefits, right? Because we will always talk about the benefits of like, how can this help? But more or less go to the other side of it and kind of figure out, all right, so here are the benefits and how do they outweigh the potential
Yep.
for this to be used for harm, right?
Mhm.
And then take into an account, obviously, in that decision-making process, socioeconomic factors
Yep.
or, anything else that might be actually very relevant to what's happening today.
Exactly.
Um, so there's, I would imagine, processes by which, hey, we think this application of AI can be used, and then it has to go through a clearinghouse. I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, nobody's on their own here. And again, that's why we have a responsible innovation team. It's why we partner across Google. We call our extended team the AI Principles Ecosystem, which is made up
I need a better name
informally.
for my, because I'm learning my team name is horrible based on all the names that you have right now.
Oh, thank you. But there's always a moment to rebrand or come up with a great acronym. And that's no accident either. We've come up with these names to really inspire people and to get them engaged. We've had to in the past, quite honestly. Like when I think before this season of AI, a lot of Googlers weren't familiar with our work, and we actually took a really proactive stance in terms of branding it in a way that would be engaging. So anyway, thank you for that. And
Sure. It's working. I'm inspired. I'm
okay,
inspired just listening to the team names.
okay,
So, that the first principle, I would love to just kind of unpack a little bit, and just in terms of like the principles, I think you said socially beneficial. So can you provide some examples of how that lands in market for our customers and consumers? Because I think a lot of people don't, I think a lot of the gray area for a lot of people are like, that they don't, again, know that a lot of these things are already put into practice, right? And things that are socially beneficial. So would you mind providing some examples of what that might look like in market today?
yep. So this is a great principle. It's kind of like our umbrella principle, and it also really reflects, I think, our mission as a company. In fact, all of the principles kind of roll up to that mission. And I also like to say that AI itself helps Google fulfill its mission. Google couldn't hire enough engineers, or there's aren't enough people who could work the amount of hours to translate all of the languages we have online via Google Translate, to have to hand code directions on Google Maps, to even test a lot of our products for safety and privacy. We have safety classifiers, we have safety filters, we have, a lot of helpful automation through AI so we can achieve our mission to make, organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So be socially beneficial, I think, rolls up to that. It's one of our biggest catch-alls. I would really emphasize too that this one also addresses some of our biggest products, such as anything related to content, quality content, making sure that we're respecting cultural, social, legal norms across the world, as well as really thinking about, what AI can do to make the world a better place. So there's a lot of research that's going on in terms of flood forecasting. There's a lot of research going on in terms of sustainability and building that into products and services like Google Maps, sort of keeping people on maybe more sustainable routes or suggesting them. But I think maybe for some of the products that people really know well with our clients, I think, looking at content quality is one that is really covered by this because we know misinformation can be really dangerous. We know that it can be harmful. So a lot of the work that we do to sort of amplify that work with technology, with AI technology too, is aligned with this principle. I guess though, maybe going back to the decision making, this principle is really helpful when there are tough decisions. So for example, maybe there is a technology that automatically changes lip movement on a video for dubbing in a different language. You can see how dangerous that might be for
Mm.
creating deep fakes. But we've had to make a decision. I also sit on our team that does ethics reviews for different launches. And we had to make the decision that, in an educational context, this could actually be really helpful when people are learning different languages or they're learning about a topic and they want to access a video that might teach them faster. And we partnered with different educational institutions to test this out and sort of made the decision that this technology with guardrails on it used only for educational purposes, that provides a lot of social benefit.
Yeah.
So even though it could lead to really dangerous misinformation.
Yeah, I think that is like it's obviously, top of mind for many people, right? And just in terms of how the technology can actually be used malicious based behaviors.
Yeah.
Um, I have really enjoyed the conversation around stamping like content like this was generated by AI or disclosing, right, the fact that this might be an AI generated either piece of content, video, or what have you. So we know that there's a whole area of, and we could probably talk all day about that. There's a whole area for the potential for, malice and kind of ill intent with AI. Would love to talk about and unpack a little bit about like just kind of bias, right?
Mhm.
Like think about this concept of bias. And we have our unconscious bias that we obviously all have as human beings. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of how do you program AI, or how do you actually begin to think about AI in terms of what biases, might be possible, unknowing, obviously not intentional within some of these AI solutions?
Yeah. It's a big question and one that, really keeps everyone on their toes. There's so much research in this space and so much experience in this space. So going back to the AI principles, when we look at bias, we really focus on unfair bias. We are really conscious that there are a lot of different types of biases, including maybe a bias for fairness or a bias towards inclusion. There can be positive biases as well. So in the realm of responsible AI and the AI principles, we're really focused on avoiding, reinforcing unfair biases or creating unfair biases. And this is an example of where the principles come in really handy because they give us a focus for conversation and for decision making. If you actually go to externally, we have ai.google/principles. We list out all of these principles. You can see that under our second principle around unfair bias, as a company, we've been very clear what we mean by unfair bias and really acknowledge, to your point, that there's no simple way to define what's unfair across cultures and societies. And that also changes almost every day. So what we've done with this principle is be super clear, say what we mean is we want to avoid unjust impact on people from AI systems and in specifically around sensitive characteristics. So things like nationality, income, ability, gender.
Yeah, I mean, like I think one of the things that I do love about Google, right, is this notion of accountability,
Yeah.
right? How we're actually accountable to the everyday consumers, and we're obviously everyday consumers of a lot of the Google solutions. Um, how do we know that, right? How do we know that we're having impact, like our AI is having impact in people's lives, and more importantly, how do we know if it's beneficial or if it's actually harmful? Are there ways of which we go about testing that?
Yep. We do a lot of rigorous testing before launch. So one thing that the responsible innovation team does in partnership with others across the company, there's more than 200 Googlers working in this AI principles ecosystem. We we do a lot of consulting and testing. And some of the testing, I'll focus on unfair bias for a moment, happens early in the product development lifecycle. So teams can do vast adversarial testing, which is basically getting Googlers from around the world to break an AI model or break an AI feature, basically intentionally violate all of our policies and identify what could be mitigated, what could be fixed, and working with the product teams early on. Recently, we actually did that externally with the DEF CON conference and had sort of ethical hacking on one of our models. That was very helpful. We could see people outside of Google breaking these
Amazing. I bet you that
AI
was
models.
really eye-opening.
It was very eye-opening and, learned a lot, including being comfortable with that, really
Yeah.
opening up a model externally and making sure that, that could be safe too for everybody involved. But yeah,
That's
so
it's one thing to get beaten up by your own team and
yeah,
internal colleagues and then putting yourself out there to the general public. But that is, wow, that's the next level accountability, which is really, really cool to hear.
yeah, yeah. No, it was very, very eye-opening and meaningful and rewarding. But we also have a lot of feedback mechanisms in, especially in our generative AI products. That is one of our emerging best practices. We've looked at our AI ethics reviews over the last year and saw that having like simple and clear explanation and feedback, even if it's a thumbs up, thumbs down, is really helpful for the teams as well as for the models, meaning the AI models
Yeah.
to learn from.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I think that we don't talk a lot about, right? Because again, I think this happens in most technology companies, which is we kind of sit among technologists. And so a lot of these concepts are very common to us and we speak, anybody coming in from the outside of Google will tell you, right? Like we speak a different language here. And again, I think that's true of most technology companies. I think one of the huge things that we've been considering, and I would love to get your kind of thoughts on this, is like, how do you actually publicly explain AI,
Mhm.
right? And its applications. And so, being able to, and being in technology, I often like it to my mother. Like, can I explain this to my
Yep.
mom?
Yep.
Right. Who still probably uses an AOL 56K dial modem, going through her computer. But like, you know, these systems can be really complex, right? Even for technologists. So how do we go about explaining what it is we're developing to the general public? Because I think a lot of the angst also might come from, I don't understand it and it seems really powerful. And so that's what is probably providing a lot of the anxiety.
Yep. Yeah. And I think there are, and you probably do this in your either when you're explaining to your mom or to clients or even other Googlers, or at a party, analogies come in really that can be
Yeah.
very helpful. Really emphasizing that AI can be a helpful partner, right? And talking about the relationship of the human to the AI, the person to the AI, as well as really thinking about just simple ways of the value of the AI to a person using the product. You
Mm.
can see this in a lot of the UX writing, actually, with some of the features that are coming out. Some of them are very verb based, like help me write. help me visualize, help me, do a task, which is basically what AI does. It helps people complete tasks. We've also been talking to teams on, how do you offer, quite honestly, disclosures on limitations within the product experience too, because we're in really early days, especially with generative AI. There are known limitations across a lot of large language models. Companies are very upfront about that in terms of, these are basically predictions. It's almost like I think people talk about Mad Libs or filling in blanks based on associations, similar that to somebody might do that if they were playing a game of Mad Libs as a person. Sort of you're making association and offering these sequences of words. And so we try to have those in product, again, have the very verb-based UX writing so people know what the AI is helping with, as well as, very simple descriptions in the product itself. So somebody doesn't have to go somewhere else, like look something up, like, why isn't this working? Is it normal that it's not working for me? Or I'm getting maybe an answer that is not quite right, you know, sort of having those explanations within the product experience is really important.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think that's, and it probably obviously aids to your feedback loop, right?
Yep,
In terms of what
totally.
you're just talking about, like, that's immediate feedback for a consumer to actually give you. And so, yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
always helpful.
I think too, just Steve, going back to um your comment about branding, like if you really look too at some of the branding around AI and generative AI, you'll notice something that looks like a magic wand. I think that's like a really good analogy of how this works. Like if I had a magic wand that could come up with 10 suggestions of how I might write this document, or if I had a magic wand to help me find something in a way that I don't have to type like a formal question. And I feel like that's one of the really strong ways that Google is looking at how to communicate what generative AI is and how it works. So it's also fun. So it's
I
always good.
like that little magic. Now, actually, I feel like a failure. I'm having a podcast on AI, kind of use AI to actually generate my questions. So that's a mental note now. I feel like I've totally let down the podcast. Yeah, I think, when you look at the consumers, a lot of that also bleeds into kind of our customer discussions,
Yep.
right? Just in terms of, you know, what we hear from our customers is, how do I be prepared for like an AI centered world? Or what are the top things I need to do, in an AI centered world? And I think those are great questions, right? And for the most part, I think there's a portion of that where it's clear that they don't know that they've been using it already, probably in their everyday lives as well as the business world. But are there things that you would recommend that they start considering as part of their AI journey for those brands and for those companies? Cause I think that's top of mind for a lot of these larger organizations that we do business with.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that one of the projects I work on is, I think I mentioned this, People Plus AI research initiatives. And some of the content that we've been working on there is simply trying to remind people that they're in control when they're using AI. I think that's where a lot of, again,
Terminator
yep,
fear.
yes, exactly, exactly. But somebody had to make the Terminator originally. So, and the Terminator also interacted with people in different ways, including
Yes.
very positive ones. So, we have to remember that they're in control. And that sounds so simple, but it's easy maybe because of science fiction in the past to forget that. But that is, I think, really important. I think your point about people have been using AI already very naturally over time. I mean, it's been decades since early machine learning was used for spam filters or even spell checking, even here at Google. So they can trust that. They can also trust that, if they're fans of everyday apps like Maps, you know, Translate, etc., they
Yeah.
can start seeing the helpfulness of machine learning and AI. But I really think that sort of recasting your control. What do you want AI to help you with? Um,
What do you want to do with magic wand?
yeah, exactly. What do you want to do with that magic wand? Exactly.
Yeah, I think I love that. I love that approach, right? And I know we're winding down here, but like I think it's such a great point to be made, which is, your original point just a moment ago around it's designed to help you with simple tasking, right? I've heard, my manager, Kristen O'Hara, speak about, AI and all of its benefits and how, it has the potential, if it's used the way it's intended for a lot of these tasking things, to free up kind of the human mind to actually think, right? To actually give it space to actually create and innovate and continue to innovate. So I really do love that point. And I think it's a great one to be made for all of our customers and even the consumers. All right. So I think it's about time we're wrapping up. So what would be your parting thoughts for our listeners today? Well, like what should be the main takeaways?
Yeah, I think, keep asking the questions, even the tough questions. That's really healthy. It's actually very responsible to think about what could potentially be risky, what could potentially be harmful. So keep asking those, but ask them in pursuit of the responsible answers. I think that's a framing that would love for Googlers and clients and customers and users to always keep in mind, as well as you're in control. You have that magic wand. I use it responsibly as well.
Okay. So with that, I am definitely going to ask Bard about my Halloween outfit for the Thank you so much.
Thank you.
These topics are incredibly complicated, but I do love kind of this whole concept about responsibility and accountability, right? And just how serious we take that. And then not just us, but how everyone who is interacting with AI should take that. So thank you so much for your time, Matt. I believe I'm going to pass it back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And thank you both for joining us for today's episode. It's been really great to listen to you cover everything from origin of AI principles and having a healthy skepticism of AI to how Google approached the creation of the principles of responsible AI. And I'd also like to second Steve's point, Reena, that if you ever need more people to join any of these cool IS things, you just let us know because we're ready. Would love to be able to join. So, and to our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in today and stay on the lookout for our next episode coming in the next few weeks. We'll see you next time.